students with ADHD, kids with ADHD have the best of intentions. They want to be successful. I've never met a kid that didn't. They want to do the right thing, but literally the way that their brain is wired, it is hard for them to do that. And so they need uber amounts of patience and allowing them to retry over and over and over again. And just when you're at the edge of your rope, yes, keep giving them more chances.
Welcome to the Individual Matters Podcast. I'm Andrew Caton. Today, I'm joined in the studio by Josh Gudat. Josh is a middle school social studies teacher with over 20 years experience in the classroom. He and his wife, Dion, who is also a teacher, co-own Essentials in Learning, a tutoring and ADHD coaching business in Grand Junction. Today, Josh is going to talk with us about ADHD in the classroom, what it looks like from a teacher's perspective, how he uses structure in his classroom and works with students to help them understand and build their skills, and he'll also offer some thoughts for parents and teachers. At the end of our conversation, I'll talk about the upcoming Learning About Learning Parent Symposium that Josh and his wife are teaming up with us at Individual Matters to deliver in Grand Junction on February 24th. This is for parents who are interested in learning about ADHD and executive functioning and what they can do to help their students. Okay, let's get back to the conversation with Josh. Well, thank you for being here, Josh. I'm really excited about this conversation. Just right out of the gates, what thoughts do you have for parents and teachers and ADHD? What do they need to know?
So I would say, like, as a parent, I would want to become informed about ADHD. I know that a lot of times when a kiddo is diagnosed with ADHD, we know he has it or she has it, but we don't really understand what that means. I mean, we kind of hear stereotypes and things like that. And so I just think becoming knowledgeable about ADHD, so you know what are the executive functioning deficits or executive functioning delays that the kiddo has. I think I would start there. And then from there, we can start to look at things like getting your kiddo a 504, that will allow accommodations to be made in the classroom. Many teachers will make these accommodations anyway, but the 504 guarantees those accommodations and gives you some recourse if they're not being followed so that you can support your kiddo.
Okay. From the teacher side of things, how does that 504 process work early on from your perspective?
From a teacher perspective, we get a list of kiddos that have 504s. At the beginning of the year, the 504 will have their accommodations. We review those and make sure we know what those accommodations are, as the school year progresses. Generally, you'll have one 504 meeting a year to kind of revisit it, make sure that the accommodations are still working for the kiddo, and usually teachers are a part of that process as well.
We were talking a little bit about your perspectives about specific accommodations and the ones that you found seem to work really well and integrate into the classroom. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I see a lot on accommodations is extra time. I think that's just kind of a generic thing that people put on IEPs as well as 504s. And for the ADHD kiddo, I think that's not a real great accommodation because a lot of ADHD kiddos don't have a good sense of time, the passage of time. And so giving them extra time means they're going to waste extra time and still not get it done. And so I think knowing about ADHD, I know that, chunking assignments, chunking assessments is a better strategy where, a teacher will tell if they have 25 math problems on this assessment, a teacher will say, okay, do these 5 math problems and then come and see me. And then when the kiddo comes, you can give them a little bit of feedback. Hey, nice job. And then give them 5 more to do. And that's going to be a lot better of accommodation for an ADHD kiddo because they need that frequent feedback and small chunks of things.
That makes sense versus open-ended assignment dates. And because I guess if they're struggling to manage time and time awareness, that's not maybe doing them the best service.
Correct.
To just have these open-ended due dates and those kinds of things.
Correct. And that chunking can even be like long-term projects, giving them a piece of the project and saying, get it done by this time. and then kind of keep giving them pieces until they're done. That's going to kind of scaffold them into the executive functioning that they need of planning, organization, and to help them be more successful.
Do you feel like even without the 504, with all of your experience, you're probably pretty quick to identify ADHD-like symptoms and behaviors? Are there any other techniques that you use? Is it a global approach in your classroom, or do you kind of go student by student and figure out what works?
I mean, the gold standard of teaching is to differentiate for each kid in your class and to make sure that you're meeting their needs with whatever symptoms they're displaying. I'm not perfect at that for sure. I'm still growing even after 20 whatever years. But I do notice, students that display ADHD type behavior, and I make accommodations on the fly for them. For example, if I know that we're going to be sitting and watching a video or something, they're going to need something to do with their hands. And so I offer a fidget for them. I teach them how to use the fidgets because sometimes the fidget will become a distraction. Having the fidget under your table or under your desk, and keeping your eyes on the video, things like teaching them how to use those fidgets. I think that's helpful to help them be successful in being able to pay attention.
Now, you teach middle school social studies.
7th grade.
That's a great age. How do they respond, the students, to these? Because you're not only using strategies, you're explaining to them why you're doing it. So for kiddos that are coming in with a 504, how knowledgeable, self-aware are they of ADHD and what they need to do? And how does that work?
That's a great question. I would say most of the kiddos that I work with, both at Essentials in Learning and at Orchard Mesa Middle School, are not they know they have ADHD, but they're not aware of what exactly does that mean. And a lot of times they just go to the I'm hyper and can't focus. And ADHD is a delay in executive functioning. And there's a lot of executive functioning skills there that they might not be aware of that they struggle with. So I think that me kind of training them on that is part of or making them self-aware is part of the goal that I have. I can think of one kiddo that I had in class who I did get a 504 for him, and I kind of reviewed it and knew that he had that. And so I just kind of met with him near the beginning of the school year and kind of front loaded him with, I know I'm going to need to redirect you a lot. I don't want you to take that as being you're in trouble. Just kind of explain to him that you'll need that. We kind of came up with a system that he wanted for the redirects. And it's been reasonably successful. We've had to revisit that a couple times throughout the year, but it's been reasonably successful, not making him feel bad, not making it super noticeable around the class. And I think that has helped him to be more successful.
Your students are familiar with the term ADHD. It's pretty common. Are they?
It gets thrown around a lot for sure.
Yeah. Are they pretty respectful and of other kids that have ADHD? Is there any stigma attached to it, or is this a private conversation, or how does that all work?
It's a private conversation. Usually, after class real quick, I'll pull them aside or something. But I do think there is a stigma. I don't think that kids kind of use the term ADHD, but they just know, hey, that kid, blurts a lot in class, or, throws things, or is always, destroying pencils, or, I think they know those kids. And I do think, there's some eye rolls, there's some, there is some stigma attached to it, but I wouldn't say they label it like ADHD. Mm-hmm. It's just that kid.
Is there a certain presentation of ADHD? You talked about hyperactivity, which most people are probably most familiar with. Is there a style or presentation that can be more disruptive in the classroom versus another? I mean, there's the inattentive type who probably don't cause problems for the other students, but internally
still struggle
to
complete tasks, still struggle to chunk long-term assignments, still struggle with all those executive functioning skills for sure.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So you talked about chunking. Are there any other accommodations that you found to be especially helpful for kids with ADHD, and then maybe even just globally in your classroom in terms of teaching style or teaching philosophy?
I mean, I think that every kid you'd have to review and see what that kid needs, because ultimately they're all human beings with different needs. But some common accommodations, I think, being able to have a fidget. You'd be surprised at the number of teachers that ban fidgets from the classroom. And I could see why, because sometimes that becomes a distraction or a play toy or something, because the kiddo's not properly trained, and even the teacher is not properly trained in like the purpose of a fidget, how to use it, so it becomes a problem. But that's something you could write into a 504, just the kiddo being allowed to have that in class. Obviously, if it becomes a problem, we would address that. I think extra time, um, especially when dealing with non-ADHD kiddos, is a good accommodation for kids who have processing issues or things like that. Is a good accommodation. Preferential seating is another common one. I think that's essential with a kiddo with ADHD, to have them maybe sitting up front where the teacher can redirect them more subtly, is another big accommodation that I would recommend.
So we're mostly focused on ADHD, but of course this overlaps with executive functioning. For kids that are just disorganized from start to finish, whether it's turning in homework or organizing their backpack or remembering what they need to do, do you have any broad approaches or any key techniques that you use to support that in the classroom?
Yeah, and you're probably referring to about 95% of the middle schoolers out there. I don't know any that don't need some executive functioning, skills. I think they're still developing those. One thing I like is, and it's an executive functioning skill in and of itself, is metacognition. Like, help them to think about their learning, to think about their thinking, why we do things, to kind of make them aware of that. So I think just embedding that into a classroom. So a lot of times teachers will, with a longer term project, will have kind of some deadlines, some minor deadlines leading up to that, to help the kiddos with staying organized. I know I have students with notebooks and folders. They don't leave the classroom. I train them to put their materials back in the folder. You think that's obvious, but it's not to middle schoolers. Put their materials back into the folder. It takes a little bit of time at the end of class to make sure that that's happening. But those are just some basic executive functioning skills, so that you put your paper here, it's going to be there when you get it the next day, that kind of thing. Because a lot of middle school kids literally will just get up and walk out of the room. They'll leave their Chromebooks, their pencils all over the place. They just don't think that way.
Do you find it's helpful in terms of the pace of your classroom, how you run your class from beginning until end in a given day? Do you slow things down, or how do you find the time to teach these kinds of skills and awareness versus just the subject matter content? Do you just have to slow everything down, or?
I think you can do a lot of embedding. I run a launch unit at the beginning of the year that kind of trains kids into the structures and routines of my classroom. Middle school kids with ADHD thrive with structure and routine. And so, that's a 3 or 4 week unit that we don't do a lot of heavy content, but it's more just training them in. And it's kind of that go slow to go faster mode, where we go slow to learn those routines. But now here in February, or I guess January, sorry, get ahead of myself. Here in January, we're rolling as a class, and we're not focused on those executive functioning skills as much. We're focused on the content, and we can get a lot of that in.
You've built the habits to move forward to scaffold the learning of the subject matter material.
Yeah, and incidentally, as a parent, I think we can do the same things at home. Structure and routine, having a regular study time each evening at the same time helps with task initiation, because the kids just know that that's the routine, that's what's going to happen. Getting into a routine in the study time of what that looks like. Those are things that parents can do to kind of help support middle school kids, of course, but also kids with ADHD that kind of need that structure and routine at home.
You're leading right into my next question. So structure, routine at home. Are there any other suggestions in order keep this somewhat concise, and we're going to get you back on, I hope, and talk at length about a little bit some of the details on this. But as far as recommendations or suggestions to parents who are concerned their child might have ADHD, do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts. I think that number one is that identifying your child as ADHD, I think, in my opinion, is helpful. Getting that diagnosis because it there a lot of self-confidence issues happen with kids who have ADHD that's undiagnosed. They go through life thinking it's them, it's their, but really it's a biological thing. It's and getting that diagnosis helps them to realize that my brain works differently than other people's brains, and I need some strategies to manage that so that I can be successful. So I think getting that diagnosis is important. And then the medication issue I know is a huge controversial thing, but I would say if the kid needs medication, then to have them take it. We have a lot of parents that, doctors are recommending medication and the parents refuse, and that just sets the child up for not being very successful.
You're extremely knowledgeable about this, and it's clear that you are able to build really good rapport with your students as well. I know that's probably a key component of working with them. Do you have any tips for working with ADHD type students in terms of building rapport? Because as you'd mentioned with the hyperactivity and some of the other things going on, that kind of behavior can be stressful for a teacher in a classroom. Do you have any just real general tips for teaching or parenting or anybody who's working with kids with ADHD?
I could say it in one word: patience. I think, students with ADHD, kids with ADHD have the best of intentions. They want to be successful. I've never met a kid that didn't. They want to do the right thing, but literally the way that their brain is wired, it is hard for them to do that. And so they need uber amounts of patience and allowing them to retry over and over and over again. And just when you're at the edge of your rope, yes, keep giving them more chances. I do think ADHD coaching works. I think that's can help them. Setting up structures and routines, like doing all of those pieces as well, but patience is the key.
That's a perfect summary. Is there anything else you want to share?
I think, we could talk about this for a long time, but I think, that gets us started.
Absolutely. Let's make that happen sometime. We'll get you back on, talk at more length about some of these, but thanks for sharing with us today.
Sounds good.
If you're interested in learning more about Josh and Dion and the tutoring and ADHD services offered through Essentials in Learning, you can go to their website, essentialsinlearning.com. They recruit only the most qualified, highly trained, and motivated educators that have years of experience, can build a relationship with your child, and teach them strategies that ensure exceptional results. Also, as I mentioned at the start of this episode, Josh and his wife are teaming up with us at Individual Matters to deliver our 2024 Learning About Learning Symposium for parents. This year's topic is Building Executive Function Skills for Successful Learning. What can we do as parents? This will take place February 24th from 9 to 2 at the Individual Matters building in Grand Junction. It'll be an interactive workshop with simulations, panel discussions, small group practice, reflection, and application of new skills. We're really excited about this. It's going to be a lot of fun and you'll learn a lot. You can register at individualmatters.org by clicking on the Register Here link. Seats are limited, so don't wait to sign up. That's it from us today. As always, you can find more information as well as resources on our website, individualmatters.org. We hope you'll join us at the next podcast where we'll continue to explore topics around successful living, learning and education, and child development, and share ways to help you live a more positive and fulfilling life.
The preceding information is not intended to provide or serve as medical, clinical, or educational advice. Individual Matters is not responsible for the accuracy of guest statements. All information should be validated independently. Please consult with your doctor, mental health provider, attorney, or other appropriate professionals before making any personal decisions for yourself or those in your care.